The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than Earth's moon and filled with lights that sparkled like diamonds. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its ports. Today was special. Today was the day when all the smart races of the galaxy would show off their best machines. Tom Williams walked through the long metal halls of the station. His old boots made quiet sounds on the smooth floor. He carried a small case in his hands. Inside that case were Earth's hopes. Tom was not young anymore. His hair was gray and his face had lines from years of flying dangerous test flights back on Earth. He had seen rockets blow up. He had crashed planes. But he never gave up. Around him, aliens of all shapes and sizes moved with confidence. Some looked like giant cats with purple fur. Others were tall and thin like walking trees. Some had too many arms. Some had no arms at all. But they all had one thing the same. They all thought they were better than humans. The main hall was huge. It could hold 1 million people. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. In the center was a stage where each race would show their best technology. Tom found his seat in a corner. It was not a good seat. The aliens had given humans the worst spot because they thought humans were not important. The show began. First came the Altarians. They looked like blue dolphins that could walk. Their leader, Admiral Finn, pressed a button. A hologram appeared showing their fastest spaceships. These ships could jump between stars in just minutes. The crowd made sounds of wonder. Our quantum-fold fighters, Admiral Finn said in a voice that sounded like singing, can travel faster than light itself. We can cross the galaxy in days. Everyone clapped. Tom watched and nodded. It was good technology. Very good. Next came the Centauri. They were plant people with green skin and leaves for hair. Their ships were not made of metal. They were grown like trees. Dr. Root stepped forward with pride. Our bioships are alive, she said. Her voice sounded like wind through grass. They heal when damaged. They learn and grow stronger. They never need fuel because they eat space, dust and starlight. The crowd was impressed. Some aliens stood up to clap. Tom wrote notes in his small book. These living ships were amazing. Then came the Vegans. They were the oldest race in the galaxy. They looked like walking crystals that caught light and threw rainbows. Lord Prism moved to the stage like he owned it. Behold, he said in a voice like breaking glass, our planet breaker weapons. The hologram showed a weapon that could crack worlds in half. We have kept peace in the galaxy for 10,000 years with these. The hall went quiet with fear and respect. Even Tom felt scared. These weapons could destroy Earth with one shot. Race after race showed their technology. The spider people had ships that could turn invisible. The rockmen had armor that nothing could break. The gas clouds had computers that could think faster than any brain. Finally, it was Earth's turn. Tom stood up slowly. His knees hurt. He walked to the stage while hundreds of alien eyes watched him. He could hear some aliens whispering and laughing, quietly. Tom opened his case. Inside were some data chips and a small projector. He set it up with shaking hands, not because he was scared, but because he was old and tired. I am Tom Williams, he said into the microphone. His voice was rough but strong. I speak for Earth and the human race. He pressed a button. The hologram showed human rockets. They were big and loud and used fire to push themselves into space. The aliens looked confused. This was old technology. Very old. These are our chemical rockets, Tom said. They burn fuel and make fire. They are loud and sometimes they blow up. Some aliens started to giggle. Tom ignored them and showed the next image. This is our fusion drive prototype, he said. The hologram showed a strange engine with pipes and wires everywhere. It looked like it was held together with tape. We built it last year. It barely works. Sometimes it catches fire. Now, more aliens were laughing. Tom could hear them making jokes in their strange languages. Is this a joke? Called out someone from the crowd. It was Council Leader Vex. He ruled the hegemony, the most powerful empire in the galaxy. He looked like a walking diamond with many sharp edges. Humans, you have been in space for less than 100 years. We have been traveling between stars since before your son was born. The laughter got louder. Tom stood quiet and waited. Your prototype, Vex continued, uses technology that we perfected 10,000 years ago. What could you possibly teach us? What could you show us that we do not already know better? Just then, a news alert flashed on the screens around the hall. It showed a human airplane on Earth. Smoke was coming from one engine. People were running away as it made an emergency landing. The aliens saw this and laughed even harder. Look, shouted someone. They cannot even fly safely on their own planet. Their planes catch fire with people inside. How can they build spaceships if they cannot build airplanes? Tom watched the news report. Yes, it was embarrassing, but he knew something the aliens did not know. He knew that the pilot had saved everyone on that plane. He knew that human pilots trained for emergencies like this. He knew that humans learned from every mistake. The laughter was so loud now that Tom could barely hear himself think. Aliens pointed at him and shook their heads. Some were taking pictures to show their friends back home. The great human space program was a joke to them. Council leader Vex stood up. His crystal body caught the light and threw sparkles across the room. Humans, he said in a voice that cut through the noise. Perhaps you should go home and learn to build better airplanes before you try to build starships. The whole hall erupted in laughter and applause. Tom felt his face get hot with shame. But he did not run away. He did not shout back. Instead, he closed his case quietly and picked it up. As he walked toward the exit, Tom stopped and turned back to face the crowd. The laughter slowly died down as aliens wondered what he would say. Tom looked at all the proud faces. He looked at their perfect technology and their confident smiles. Then he spoke in a quiet voice that somehow everyone could hear. Sometimes, he said, the oldest ideas work best when you need them most. Then he walked out of the hall, leaving behind a galaxy that thought humans were fools. They had no idea that in just a few months those same humans would save them all. But that is a story for another day. The aliens went back to their parties and celebrations. They forgot about the old human and his broken machines. They forgot about the plane that caught fire and the rockets that sometimes exploded. They would remember soon enough. 6 months had passed since the great humiliation at Nexus Prime. Tom Williams was back on Earth, working in a small office in Colorado. He spent his days writing reports that nobody read. The other human diplomats avoided him. They blamed him for making Earth look foolish in front of the galaxy. But Tom did not care about their blame. He was busy studying something else, something that made his blood run cold. The first reports came from the edge of the galaxy. A trading post called Haven's Rest had gone silent. This happened sometimes. Pirates attacked traders, or equipment broke down. The Galactic Council sent a patrol ship to check. The patrol ship never came back. Then 3 more outposts went dark. Then a whole mining colony. The aliens were starting to worry, but they were not scared yet. The galaxy was big. Sometimes things got lost. Everything changed when the Altarian battle fleet disappeared. Admiral Finn had taken 50 of his best quantum-fold fighters to investigate the Silent Zone. These were the ships that could jump between stars in minutes. They were fast, smart, and deadly. Finn sent regular reports as his fleet moved deeper into the darkness. Then nothing. The last message was just screaming, and the sound of metal tearing apart. Council leader Vex called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every major world gathered on Nexus Prime again. But this time, nobody was laughing. The great hall that had been full of jokes 6 months ago was now quiet with fear. Something is destroying our ships, Vex announced. His crystal body was glowing brighter than usual, which meant he was afraid. We have lost contact with 17 systems in the past month. Dr. Root from the Centauri stood up. Her leaf hair was turning brown with worry. My bioships went to help the Altarians. They sent one message before they died. They said the attackers were wrong. Not natural, not alive, but not machines either. Lord Prism spoke next. The ancient Vagan's crystal form was flickering like a broken light. We sent our planet breaker weapons, enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. The weapons fired once, then went silent forever. Fear spread through the hall like a disease. If the Vagan's ultimate weapons could not stop these attackers, what could? The answer came from an unlikely source. A small scout ship from the Rockmen had escaped the latest attack. The pilot, Captain Stone, was badly injured but alive. He stood before the council with bandages covering half his face. "I saw them," he said in a voice like grinding rocks. "They are not like anything we know. They are geometric shapes, perfect and impossible. They do not fly. They just appear where they want to be. And they eat energy." The hall went silent. "My ship's shields were drained in seconds," Stone continued. "My weapons stopped working when I fired them. Every bit of power I had was sucked away. The only reason I survived is because my emergency systems shut down everything. I drifted, like a dead rock until they lost interest." Vex stood up slowly. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Stone replied, "that these things consume any form of energy we use. Fusion power, plasma weapons, quantum engines. They eat it all, and every time they feed, they get stronger." A Centauri scientist named Dr. Leaf raised one of her branch arms. "That is impossible. There are laws of physics. Energy cannot just disappear." "Tell that to the 17 systems that went dark," Stone shot back. The debate that followed was loud and desperate. Some aliens wanted to attack, with everything they had. Others wanted to run to the far edges of the galaxy. A few suggested surrendering, though nobody knew how to surrender to something that could not be talked to. While the council argued, the attacks continued. The hegemony's home fleet vanished overnight. The Spider People's invisible ships were found floating dead in space, their crews missing. The gas cloud's supercomputers went silent mid-calculation. Each victory made the attackers stronger. Intelligence reports described them as massive geometric shapes that pulsed with stolen energy. They called themselves nothing. They said nothing. They just consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. Captain Jake Morrison read these reports from his small office on Luna Base. Jake commanded Earth's tiny defense fleet. 12 old ships that most aliens would consider scrap metal. He was Tom Williams' nephew, and he had inherited his uncle's stubborn nature. Jake looked at the tactical data with tired eyes. He had been awake for 3 days straight, trying to understand the enemy. The pattern was always the same. Advanced, ships would engage the attackers. The attackers would drain their power and leave them floating helplessly. Then the attackers would move on, leaving behind dead husks of what used to be the galaxy's finest technology. But Jake noticed something the aliens had missed. He pulled up the casualty reports and cross-referenced them with ship designs. The quantum fold fighters died first because they used the most energy. The bioships lasted longer because they used life force instead of artificial power, but they died too. The planet breaker weapons were drained instantly because they channeled massive amounts of energy. There was a pattern here. The attackers, someone had started calling them devourers, could only consume energy-based technology. They could not drain what was not there to begin with. Jake's communication system beeped. An encrypted message was coming in from Nexus Prime. The sender was Tom Williams. "Jake," his uncle's voice sounded old and tired. "The situation is worse than the reports say. The Devourers are not just random attackers, they are systematic. They are consuming the galaxy piece by piece, system by system. The Council estimates we have maybe 3 months before they reach the core worlds." Jake leaned forward. "What about Earth? Are we on their list?" Tom's laugh was bitter. "We are so far down their priority list that we might as well not exist. They go after the biggest prizes first. The most advanced technology, the most energy-rich targets. Earth is like a small snack they will save for last." "That gives us time," Jake said. "Time for what?" "Jake, you did not see what I saw on the tactical displays. These things have consumed entire fleets. They have weapons that can crack planets. What can Earth possibly do against something like that?" Jake stared at the data files on his screen. Ships that used fusion power, dead. Ships that used quantum engines, dead. Ships that used plasma weapons, dead. But there, buried in the casualty reports, was something interesting. "Uncle Tom," Jake said slowly, "what about ships that do not use advanced power systems?" "What do you mean?" "I mean old technology, really old technology, chemical rockets, mechanical systems, things that work without fancy energy sources." There was silence on the other end of the communication. Then Tom's voice came back, thoughtful and careful. "Jake, that is crazy. Chemical rockets against planet killers? It would be suicide." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But it might also be the only thing they cannot consume." As if to prove his point, another report flashed across his screen. The Centauri homeworld had gone dark. 3 billion plant people gone in a single night. Their living ships had tried to defend them. The ship's bioenergy had been drained so fast that they died screaming. Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Uncle Tom, I need you to stay alive for 3 more months. Can you do that?" "Why?" "Because," Jake said, powering up his communication system to contact Earth's hidden military bases. "Someone needs to be there to see what happens when the galaxy's biggest joke becomes its last hope." The line went dead. Jake sat in his chair and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were consuming another civilization. But here, in the Sol system, humanity was about to do something typically human. They were about to prove that sometimes the worst technology is the best technology. Jake Morrison stood in the biggest secret room on Earth. It was hidden deep under the mountains of Colorado, where his Uncle Tom used to work. Now it buzzed with activity like a beehive. Hundreds of humans worked day and night, building something the galaxy had never seen before. The room was filled with the sound of hammers hitting metal. Sparks flew from welding torches. People shouted instructions over the noise. It smelled like oil and hot metal and human sweat. To Jake, it was the most beautiful smell in the universe. Dr. Lisa Park walked up to him, wiping grease from her hands with a dirty cloth. Lisa was Earth's smartest engineer, but she looked like a mechanic. Her hair was tied back with a rubber band and her clothes had holes burned by sparks. "Jake, come see what we have built," she said with excitement in her voice. They walked through the huge underground factory. Workers were putting together spaceships, but these ships looked nothing like the sleek alien vessels. They were thick and ugly, with pipes sticking out everywhere. They had rust spots and patches welded over holes. They looked like they might fall apart if someone sneezed too hard. "Beautiful, are they not?" Lisa said with pride. Jake laughed. "Lisa, they look like garbage trucks with rocket engines." "Exactly," Lisa grinned. "That is the whole point." She led him to the biggest ship in the factory. It was 3 times larger than any human ship ever built, but it looked like it had been assembled by children playing with scrap metal. The name painted on its side read, "ESS Prometheus." "This is our flagship," Lisa explained. "She has 7 fusion drives, but none of them work properly. The radiation shielding has gaps in it. The hull is held together with welds that will probably crack under stress. And the engine room gets so hot that we had to install air conditioning just to keep the crew alive." Jake stared at the ship. "Lisa, this thing will kill everyone who flies in it." "Maybe," Lisa agreed cheerfully. "But it will definitely confuse the hell out of the Devourers." She took him inside the ship. The corridors were narrow and cramped. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation. The walls were covered with warning signs in red letters. "Danger, high radiation, do not touch, explosion hazard." In the engine room, Jake saw the fusion drives that the aliens had laughed at 6 months ago. But these were different. Instead of one clean, efficient reactor, there were 7 messy ones. They leaked radiation, made horrible noises, and seemed to be held together with duct tape and prayer. "The drives do not work the same way twice," Lisa explained. "Sometimes they produce too much power. Sometimes not enough. Sometimes they shut down for no reason. Sometimes they try to explode. We have no idea what they will do from moment to moment." "That sounds terrible," Jake said. "It is," Lisa agreed. "But think about it from the Devourer's perspective. They consume clean, predictable energy. They adapt to whatever power source they encounter. But what happens when they try to drain a Reactor that is already trying to explode? Jake began to understand. They cannot adapt to chaos. Exactly. The Devourers expect organized energy patterns. They are perfect machines built to counter perfect technology. But our technology is not perfect. It is barely functional. It breaks down in new and interesting ways every day. Lisa showed him the E1 weapons systems. Instead of plasma cannons or laser beams, the human ships carried chemical explosives, metal bullets, and kinetic impactors. Old-fashioned bombs that worked by blowing up, not by channeling energy. We have gone back to the basics, Lisa said. Gunpowder, TNT. Things that work by chemical reaction, not energy manipulation. The Devourers cannot drain an explosion that has already happened. In another part of the factory, workers were building smaller ships. These fighters looked even worse than the big ships. They had mechanical controls instead of computer systems. Their engines ran on burning chemicals. Their weapons were basically flying cannons that shot metal slugs. Captain Mike Davis was testing one of the fighters. He climbed out of the cockpit, his face pale and his hands shaking. "How did it fly?" Jake asked. "Like a brick with anger management issues," Mike replied. "The engine nearly exploded 3 times. The controls stick. The navigation system is a magnetic compass and a prayer. And the landing gear only works on Tuesdays. But it flies. Oh, it flies. It just flies like it is personally offended by the laws of physics." Meanwhile, reports from the galaxy grew worse every day. The hegemony's capital had fallen. The Centauri homeworld was a dead rock. The ancient vegans had retreated to their deepest bunkers, but even they were running out of places to hide. The Devourers were not just winning. They were growing stronger with each victory. Intelligence reports described them as massive geometric forms that pulsed with stolen energy. They had consumed the power of entire civilizations and used it to build bigger, more terrible versions of themselves. Jake received a desperate message from his Uncle Tom on Nexus Prime. The transmission was weak and full of static. "Jake, they are coming. The Devourers have consumed everything between here and the galactic core. We estimate 3 days before they reach this station. The survivors are loading onto evacuation ships, but there is nowhere left to run." Tom's voice cracked with exhaustion. "Whatever crazy plan you are working on, now would be a good time to try it." Jake looked around the factory. Human workers were loading weapons onto the ships. The fusion drives were being tested, creating small controlled explosions that shook the whole mountain. Everything was chaos, noise, and barely controlled disaster. "Lisa," Jake called out, "how many ships do we have ready?" 12 big ones, 40 fighters, and about 100 smaller vessels," she replied. "None of them work properly, and half of them will probably break down before we reach the battle." "What about crew?" "We have volunteers from every human military, pilots who were kicked out of other services for being too reckless, engineers who build things that should not work, but do anyway, Marines who think explosions are a form of art." Jake smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in months. In other words, the perfect crew for impossible ships. "Pretty much," Lisa agreed. Jake walked to the communication center and opened a channel to all the ships in the fleet. His voice echoed through the factory and reached every human who had volunteered for this insane mission. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, 6 months ago, the galaxy laughed at our technology. They said our ships were primitive. They said our fusion drives were failures. They said we should go home and learn to build better airplanes. The factory went quiet except for the distant sound of fusion drives being tested. "Well," Jake continued, "today we are going to show them what our failures can do. We are going to take our broken ships and our impossible weapons, and we are going to save a galaxy that thinks we are idiots." A cheer went up from the workers. It was not a pretty cheer. It was rough and loud and full of human stubbornness. "Load the ships," Jake ordered. "We launch in 6 hours. Time to show the universe what happens when the galaxy's biggest joke decides to stop being funny." The ESS Prometheus began powering up its 7 mismatched fusion drives. The sound was terrible, like 7 different songs being played at once, all in the wrong key. Radiation warnings flashed red. Steam vented from damaged pipes. It was the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Prime. and immediately everything went wrong. The ESS Prometheus shuddered like a dying animal. 2 of her 7 fusion drives shut down without warning. The third one started making a sound, like a screaming kettle. Red lights flashed all over the bridge as radiation leaked from the damaged shielding. "Status report," Jake Morrison shouted over the alarms. "Engines 4 and 6 are offline," reported Chief Engineer Bob Miller. His voice was calm despite the chaos. "Engine 3 is overheating. Engine 7 just caught fire, but that seems to be normal. Oh, and the coffee machine exploded. Can we still fight?" "Sir, this ship was designed to fall apart. The fact that we made it here at all is a miracle." Jake looked out the main window and saw why his uncle had sounded so desperate. Nexus Prime was under attack by 3 Devourer vessels, and they were like nothing the humans had ever seen. Each Devourer was a perfect geometric shape, triangles and cubes and spheres that somehow fit together in ways that hurt to look at. They were massive, each one bigger than a city. They pulsed with stolen energy, glowing with the power they had drained from 100 conquered worlds. Around the station, the remains of the galactic fleet were fighting a losing battle. Altarian ships fired their quantum weapons once, then went dark as their power was consumed. Centauri bioships writhed in agony as their life force was sucked away. Even the mighty Vegan planet breakers had become floating hulks, their weapons silenced forever. "Sir," called Communications Officer Mary Chen, "we are receiving a transmission from all the alien ships. They are telling us to run away." "What are they saying exactly?" Jake asked. Mary listened to her headset. Quote, "Primitive humans, your technology is too weak to help. Flee while you still can. Do not waste your lives on a hopeless battle." End quote. Jake smiled grimly. "Open a channel to all human ships." The communication system crackled to life. Jake could hear the voices of his captains, pilots who had been kicked out of other services for being too reckless, engineers who built impossible machines, Marines who thought explosions were poetry. "This is Captain Morrison," Jake announced. "As you can see, we have arrived at the party just in time. The aliens think we should run away because our ships are too primitive. I think it is time we showed them what primitive can do." "Sir," interrupted Weapons Officer Dave Thompson, "the Devourers are turning toward us. I think they want to drain our ships next." "Perfect," Jake replied. "All ships, execute Operation Broken Arrow. Remember, do not try to make your ships work properly. Let them break down in interesting ways." The Prometheus charged toward the nearest Devourer, her remaining engines screaming like banshees. Radiation poured from her damaged hull, creating a signature brighter than a small star. Her fusion drives operated on 5 different power levels simultaneously, creating an energy pattern that changed every second. The Devourer reached out with tendrils of pure energy, trying to drain the approaching human ship. The tendrils touched the Prometheus and immediately recoiled. The Devourer's adaptation systems had been designed to counter every known form of energy in the galaxy. They could drain fusion reactors, quantum engines, plasma weapons, even bioenergy from living ships, but they had never encountered a fusion drive that was trying to explode while simultaneously running out of fuel and overheating. "Sir," Bob called from the engine room, "the Devourers are trying to drain engine number 1, but it keeps changing what kind of energy it produces. I think we are confusing them." "Good," Jake replied. "Confuse them harder." Bob grinned and started pressing random buttons on his control panel. Engine number 2 began producing gamma radiation. Engine number 5 started leaking plasma. Engine number 7 exploded, then somehow kept running anyway. The Prometheus slammed into the Devourer's hull with the grace of a falling piano. Human. Marines poured through the breach, carrying chemical explosives and mechanical weapons that worked by purely physical processes. Sergeant Bill Rodriguez led the boarding party into the alien ship. The inside was like walking through a crystal cathedral designed by a computer that had gone insane. Everything was perfect geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they watched. "Okay, boys," Bill said to his squad. "Remember the plan. When in doubt, blow something up." The Devourer's internal defenses activated, beams of energy that could disintegrate anything they touched. But the human Marines were wearing armor that worked on the principle of being too stupid to die. The armor was thick metal plates held together with bolts and welding. When the energy beams hit it, the armor got hot, but it did not disappear. "Ha!" laughed Marine Tom Baker, as an energy beam bounced off his chest plate. "Your fancy space magic is no match for good old-fashioned steel." Meanwhile, the rest of the human fleet was engaging the other two Devourers using tactics that no military academy in the galaxy would have approved. Captain Sarah Jones flew her fighter directly into a Devourer's energy beam, let her engines catch fire, then used the explosion to launch herself at the alien ship's weak point. Her ship was destroyed, but not before she dropped a payload of chemical explosives that blew a hole in the Devourer's hull. Captain Mark Wilson's ship lost all power, so he used the emergency thrusters, which ran on compressed air, to ram his vessel into a Devourer's energy collector. The collision broke both ships, but the Devourer's collector was damaged beyond repair. The battle became a symphony of controlled disasters. Human ships fell apart according to human design, creating chaos that the Devourers could not predict or counter. Every time the aliens tried to drain a human fusion drive, the drive would change its energy output or simply explode. Back on the Prometheus, Dr. Lisa Park had reached the first Devourer's control center. It was a room filled with quantum computers that processed information faster than any brain could imagine. The computers were trying to analyze the human ships, but they kept getting error messages. "Let me help you with that," Lisa said cheerfully. She pulled out a small device from her toolkit, a mechanical music box that played an old Earth song called "Mary Had a Little Lamb." She attached it to the main computer core with duct tape. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourers, quantum computers, had been designed to process any form of energy or information in the universe. They could understand the thoughts of living beings, the quantum fluctuations of empty space, even the mathematical patterns that held reality together. But they could not understand why someone would attach a children's toy to a computer that could calculate the position of every atom in a galaxy. The simple, repetitive mechanical pattern of the music box created a feedback loop in the Devourer's processing systems. The computers tried to analyze the pattern, failed, tried again, failed again, and began consuming their own processing power in an endless cycle of confusion. "Sir," Bob called from the engine room, "the Devourer is starting to drain itself. Its energy levels are dropping fast." Jake watched through the window as the massive alien ship began to dim. Its perfect geometric patterns started to flicker and distort. The entity that had consumed the power of entire civilizations was being destroyed by a music box that cost $3 and played nursery rhymes. "All ships," Jake announced, "target the other Devourer's computer cores. Remember, when in doubt, attach something mechanical and stupid to their smartest systems." The tide of battle turned. Across the galaxy, the Devourer network began receiving error signals from their forward units. The perfect machine intelligence that had adapted to every possible threat found itself unable to process the concept of weaponized incompetence. Human ships continued to explode, malfunction, and fall apart. But they did so according to human design, creating patterns of chaos that the Devourers could not counter or absorb. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers encountered something they could not consume: deliberate failure combined with stubborn human refusal to admit defeat. The first Devourer went completely dark. The second one began spinning wildly as its navigation systems tried to process contradictory data from a broken compass that somehow pointed in 17 directions at once. The third one simply gave up and started flying away from the battle, as fast as its confused engines could carry it. Jake opened a communication channel to the surviving alien ships. "This is the human fleet. Nexus Prime is secure. The Devourers are retreating. The galaxy is saved by ships that should not work and weapons that barely function." There was a long silence on the communication channel. Then, one by one, the alien voices began to respond. "How?" asked an Altarian captain. "Impossible," whispered a Centauri scientist. "The humans. They broke the Devourers by being broken themselves," said a Vegan observer with something that might have been respect. Jake smiled as he watched the last Devourer disappear into the darkness between stars. Sometimes, he announced to the galaxy, the best way to win is to be too stupid to lose. 3 days after the Battle of Nexus Prime, Jake Morrison stood in the same great hall where his uncle had been humiliated 6 months earlier. But everything was different now. The hall was packed with representatives from every surviving world in the galaxy. They sat in respectful silence, their eyes fixed on the small group of humans at the center of the room. Gone were the laughs and jokes. Gone were the smug smiles and superior attitudes. The aliens looked at the humans the way people look at magicians who have just made a mountain disappear. Tom Williams walked slowly to the speaker's platform. His nephew had insisted that Tom should be the one to address the council. After all, Tom had stood here 6 months ago and taken their mockery with dignity. Now it was time for him to speak as the representative of the species that had saved them all. Tom's old boots made the same quiet sounds on the smooth floor. But this time, the aliens listened to every step. They studied his weathered face and gray hair with something like reverence. This was the man who had warned them that old ideas sometimes worked best. Council Leader Vex rose from his crystal throne. His sharp edges caught the light, but instead of reflecting arrogance, they now showed humility. "Ambassador Williams," he said in a voice like chiming bells, "the Galactic Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Tom nodded, but did not smile. "The debt is already paid, Council Leader. You gave us the motivation to prove ourselves." "By laughing at you?" Vex asked, confused. "By underestimating us," Tom replied. "Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift you can give someone." Reports had been flooding in from across the galaxy for 3 days. The Devourer network was collapsing everywhere. Their perfect intelligence had been infected by what human engineers called the music box virus, a cascade of logical errors that spread through their quantum communication systems. Dr. Lisa Park stood up to explain the technical details to the assembled scientists. Her grease-stained work clothes looked out of place among the elegant alien robes, but nobody was laughing at human fashion choices anymore. "The Devourers were designed to be perfect," she said. "They could adapt to any energy source, counter any weapon, predict any strategy. But perfection has a weakness. It cannot understand imperfection." She activated a hologram showing the quantum feedback loop that had destroyed the Devourer fleet. "When we attached mechanical devices to their computers, we introduced chaos into their perfect systems. Their intelligence tried to process random data and logical contradictions. The result was a cascade failure that spread through their entire network." Dr. Root from the Centauri raised a branch-like arm. "But how did you know this would work?" Lisa grinned. "We did not know. We were just too stubborn to give up and too crazy to do things the normal way." Admiral Finn of the Altarians spoke next. His blue skin had lost its proud glow. "Our quantum fold fighters were the fastest ships in the galaxy. The Devourers drained them in seconds." "Your ships were perfect," Jake Morrison replied from his seat in the front row. "Perfect is predictable. Predictable is easy to counter." "And your ships?" asked Lord Prism of the Vegans. Jake laughed. "Our ships barely worked. Half of them broke down before the battle even started. The other half caught fire during combat. But they broke down in ways the Devourers had never seen before." Captain Mike Davis, still bandaged from the battle, stood up. "My fighter lost power, lost weapons, and lost navigation. So I used it as a guided missile powered by compressed air. In pure stubbornness, the Devourers spent so much time trying to figure out how a dead ship was still attacking them that they forgot to defend themselves." The aliens murmured among themselves in dozens of languages. They were trying to understand how failure could become victory, how weakness could become strength. Tom walked to the center of the hall and looked up at the assembled representatives. "You asked me 6 months ago what humanity could offer that you had not already perfected. I told you that sometimes the oldest ideas work best when you need them most." He paused and looked around the room. "The oldest idea in the universe is not giving up, even when everyone tells you that you are wrong. Especially when everyone tells you that you are wrong." Council Leader Vex descended from his throne and approached Tom. The crystal being moved slowly, carefully, as if he was approaching something sacred. Ambassador Williams, the Council has made a decision. We formally invite humanity to join the Galactic Federation as a full member. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Representatives from 100 worlds stood and clapped for the species. They had mocked half a year ago, but Tom raised his hand for silence. "We accept your invitation," he said, "but with conditions." The cheering stopped. The aliens looked nervous. What could the humans possibly want? "First," Tom announced, "human ships will patrol the galaxy's borders. Our broken, chaotic, impossible ships will be the first line of defense against any threat that thinks it can adapt to everything." Vex nodded eagerly. "Agreed. What else?" "Second, we want to establish human engineering schools on every major world. We will teach your young people how to build things that should not work but do anyway." The alien scientists looked excited at this prospect. They had spent the last 3 days studying human technology, trying to understand how chaos could be turned into a weapon. "And third," Tom continued, "we want you to remember this lesson. Advanced does not always mean better. Perfect does not always mean strongest. Sometimes the best solution is the one that everyone says is impossible." Tom looked directly at Council Leader Vex. "6 months ago, you asked what we could possibly teach you. Now you know. We can teach you how to fail successfully." The hall was silent for a moment. Then Vex began to laugh. It was not mocking laughter this time, but the sound of genuine joy and relief. Other aliens joined in, and soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of a galaxy celebrating its salvation. 1 year later, human patrol ships could be found throughout the galaxy. They were still ugly, still prone to breaking down, and still held together with duct tape and determination. But they were also the most feared ships in known space because any enemy that tried to fight them quickly discovered that humans had turned malfunction into an art form. The ESS Prometheus became a legend. Tourists from across the galaxy came to see the ship that had saved them all. They marveled at her patched hull, her mismatched engines, and her proud display of the mechanical music box that had brought down an empire. Tom Williams retired to a small house on Earth, where he spent his days writing memoirs that nobody believed until they checked the historical records. He kept one souvenir from his time as an ambassador, a small piece of crystal that Council Leader Vex had given him as a token of respect. Jake Morrison became Admiral Morrison, commander of the Human Defense Fleet. His ships still caught fire, regularly, still broke down at inconvenient moments, and still somehow managed to win every battle they fought. Dr. Lisa Park opened the first human engineering academy on Centauri Prime. Her students learned to build machines that worked by defying logic, physics, and common sense. The graduation ceremony involved deliberately breaking their final projects and then fixing them with whatever materials they could find. And in the deepest parts of space, the few surviving devourers fled toward the edge of the universe. They had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of perfection. They had encountered something their vast intelligence could not process, a species that found strength in its weaknesses and victory in its defeats. The galaxy was safe, protected by ships that should not fly and weapons that barely worked. The humans had proven that sometimes the biggest joke becomes the greatest hope. And whenever young aliens asked their elders about the Great Devourer War, they were told the same story. Never underestimate someone who refuses to admit that their EO plan is impossible, especially if they are human. The end. The cruise ship Serenity's Dream moved through space like a floating palace. Its white walls gleamed under soft lights, and happy voices filled the corridors. Inside the ship, 2,147 passengers from the peaceful planet Vaxia were going home for their biggest celebration of the year. Captain Wren stood on the bridge watching the stars through the main window. He had been flying passenger ships for 20 years and had never seen any trouble. The Vaxians were a gentle people who had forgotten what war looked like. Their ships carried no weapons because they had no enemies. "Captain," called his communications officer Tal from her station, "I'm getting some strange readings ahead. Ren walked over to look at her screen. What kind of readings? Something big, sir. Really big. It looks like a ship, but Tal's voice trailed off as she adjusted her controls. The computer says it's dead, but the energy patterns don't match anything in our database. Through the main window, they could see it now. A massive dark shape hung in space like a sleeping monster. The ship was 3 times bigger than Serenity's Dream and covered in strange marks that looked like battle scars. Sharp edges stuck out from its hull like teeth. I've never seen a design like that, whispered the navigation officer, Tom. Look, at those weapon ports. Who builds ships like that? Captain Wren felt a cold fear in his stomach, but he tried to stay calm. Maybe it's an old cargo ship. Scan it and see if anyone's alive over there. Tal's fingers moved over her controls. Scanning now, Captain. I'm trying to... The dead ship suddenly blazed with light. Red warning alarms started screaming throughout. The bridge. The peaceful cruise ship shook as invisible forces grabbed it and held it tight. The engines went quiet. The lights flickered. Captain, Tom shouted over the noise. They've got us in some kind of grip beam. I can't move the ship. On the main screen, the alien vessel turned toward them like a predator opening its eyes. Bright lights moved along its hull and parts of the ship began to open like hungry mouths. Who are they? Wren asked, but no one had an answer. The communication system crackled with a voice speaking in a language none of them knew. The words sounded harsh and cruel. Then the computer's translation system kicked in and the message became clear. Surrender your ship. Do not resist. You will not be harmed if you obey. The passengers in the corridors began to panic as the ship shook. Again, children started crying. Adults pressed against the windows, staring at the monster ship outside. Captain, Tal said in a small voice. They're launching something. Small dark shapes shot out from the alien ship like angry insects. They moved fast through space, heading straight for Serenity's Dream. As they got closer, everyone could see they were boarding pods designed to cut through ship hulls. Send a distress signal, Captain Wren ordered. Send it on all frequencies. Tell anyone who can hear us that we need help. Tal's hands shook as she worked. What should I say, Captain? Tell them we're under attack by unknown raiders. Give them our position. Tell them... Wren paused, watching the boarding pods get closer. Tell them we have nearly 3,000 civilians aboard and no way to defend ourselves. The message went out into space, traveling faster than light to reach anyone who might be listening. It bounced from relay station to relay station, spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Most of the ships that received the signal were too far away to help. Military vessels began calculating how long it would take to reach the crisis, but the numbers were bad. 18 hours minimum, maybe more. But in one small corner of space, a different kind of ship picked up the message. The Iron Will was not like other ships. It was smaller than Serenity's Dream, but built like a weapon. Its hull was dark gray metal covered in scars from old battles. Inside, 43 humans worked at their stations with calm efficiency. Commander Blake read the distress message on his screen. He was a tall man with quiet eyes that had seen too much fighting. Around him, his crew waited for orders. Unknown raiders attacking civilian transport, Blake said to his officers. Nearly 3,000 souls at risk. We're the closest ship. That can make a difference. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Peters, checked the navigation computer. 3 hours at maximum burn, sir. But we don't know who we're facing or how many ships they have. Blake looked at the message again. Civilian transport, no weapons, families with children aboard. The kind of people who had never hurt anyone in their lives. Doesn't matter, he said. Helm, set course for those coordinates. Engineering, I want every bit of power you can give me. Communications, send word to High Command about what we're doing. The Iron Will turned in space and began to accelerate. Its engines burned brighter than normal as the human ship raced toward the crisis. Back aboard Serenity's Dream, the first boarding pod smashed through the hull with a shower of sparks. Emergency doors slammed shut, but more pods were coming. Through the holes in the ship, armed figures in dark armor began to pour inside. The aliens were tall and thin, with long arms and sharp claws. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their leader wore a helmet decorated with the bones of small animals. The Vaxian passengers had never seen violence before. They huddled together in groups, too scared to run and too gentle to fight back. Some tried to hide, but the raiders moved through the ship like they had done this many times before. Captain Wren stood on his bridge, watching his peaceful ship being invaded. He had no weapons to fight with and no training for war. All he could do was hope that someone had heard their call for help. In the cargo bay, the raiders began separating the passengers into groups. The strong ones would be sold as workers. The smart ones would become servants. The raiders didn't care what happened to the rest. But somewhere in the darkness of space, help was coming. The human ship Iron Will flew toward them with engines burning bright and weapons ready for war. Commander Blake and his crew had heard the call of people in danger, and they were bringing the fury of Earth with them. The Vaxians didn't know it yet, but they were about to learn why humans were called the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They were about to discover what happened when someone threatened the innocent while humans were listening. The rescue was coming, and it would be terrible and wonderful to see. The distress signal from Serenity's Dream reached the Galactic Council headquarters within minutes. In the Great Meeting Hall, representatives from dozens of peaceful species gathered around their floating desks. The emergency session began with worried voices filling the air. Ambassador Vale of the Centauri system stood up first. Her blue skin looked pale under the bright lights. "The attack happened in neutral space," she said. "The raiders are using an unknown ship design. Our databases show nothing like it." "How many civilians are aboard the transport?" asked Council Leader Nix, his forearms moving nervously. "Nearly 3,000, Vale replied. "All Vaxians. They have no military training and no weapons. The ship was heading home for their festival of lights." A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone knew what happened to civilians when pirates found them. The slave markets in the outer systems paid good money for workers, and the raiders didn't care who got hurt. "What forces do we have nearby?" Nix asked his military advisor. General Cass checked his data pad with his large elephant-like trunk. "The nearest patrol fleet is 18 hours away, sir. The 4th battle group could reach them in 22 hours, but by then..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. "Wait," said Ambassador Vale, looking at her own screen. "There's a human ship in that sector, the Iron Will. They're already moving toward the crisis." The room became very quiet. When anyone mentioned humans in the council, the mood always changed. Some species feared them, others respected them. All of them knew that humans were different from every other race in the galaxy. Trade Captain Fox from the Merchant Guild raised his hand. "I've heard stories about human ships. They say one cargo vessel fought off 12 pirate ships last year near the Rim Worlds." "Stories," muttered Ambassador Zen from his corner seat. "Humans tell many stories about themselves." But Captain Fox shook his head. "I was there, Zen. I saw the wreckage. 12 pirate ships reduced to floating metal. The human cargo ship barely had a scratch on it." Diplomatic aide Lynn stood up from her seat. She was young and had only been working at the council for 2 years. "My uncle serves on a rescue station near human space," she said quietly. "He told me about human rescue teams. They go into places that would kill anyone else. Radiation storms, collapsed space stations, ships falling into black holes. They just go in and bring people out." "But this is different," said Ambassador Vale. "This is combat. Military action." General Cass looked uncomfortable. "The humans have warships," he said slowly. "Not many species build pure combat vessels anymore. Most of our ships are for exploration or trade, but humans, they still build ships that exist only to fight wars." "How do you know this?" asked Council Leader Nix. "Because they offered to show them to us," Cass replied. 5 years ago, when the hegemony was causing trouble in the border systems, the humans asked if we wanted to see their fleet. I said yes, I wish I hadn't." The general's large eyes looked distant as he remembered. "They took me to a place they called a shipyard. I saw vessels designed to kill other ships. No cargo space, No passenger areas, no science labs, just weapons, armor, and engines. The humans who ran the ships were different too. Calm, professional. They talked about destroying enemy fleets like farmers talk about harvesting crops. Young Lin spoke again. Are they really as dangerous as everyone says? Ambassador Vale pulled up a file on her screen. Human, homeworld, Earth. Gravity twice galactic standard. Atmosphere with poison gas that most species can't breathe. Weather that includes frozen water falling from the sky and electrical storms that can kill. Predatory animals everywhere. Plants that can digest meat. The oceans are full of creatures with teeth. She paused, letting the information sink in. Humans evolved on a planet that was trying to kill them every single day. They learned to fight before they learned to build cities. They had wars for thousands of years before they reached space. But they're allies now, said Captain Fox. They trade with us, they follow council law. Yes, agreed Vale, but they're still humans. When something threatens innocent people, they don't call committees or hold votes, they just act. Far away from the council meeting, aboard the Iron Will, Commander Blake studied the tactical information his crew had gathered. The ship flew through hyperspace at maximum speed, but it would still take 3 hours to reach the crisis. What do we know about the raider vessel? Blake asked his intelligence officer, Sergeant Wall. Wall was a short woman with scars on her hands from old battles. It's big, sir, much bigger than us. The design doesn't match anything in our files, but the weapon signatures suggest it's very old, maybe from the time of the Hegemony Wars. How old? Asked Blake. 500 years, maybe more. The Hegemony built ships to last, and they built them to kill. If this is one of their lost vessels, it could have enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Lieutenant Peters looked up from his navigation station. Sir, we're just one ship. Shouldn't we wait for backup? Blake was quiet for a moment. Around him, his crew waited for the answer. These were humans who had served in the Space Marines, fought pirates in the outer systems, and rescued civilians from disasters across the galaxy. They knew their commander was thinking about the odds. How many people are on that cruise ship, Peters? Blake finally asked. Nearly 3,000, sir. And how long before the council fleet arrives? 18 hours minimum. Blake nodded slowly. Those civilians don't have 18 hours. The raiders will be gone long before any help arrives. They'll take the strong ones for slaves and leave the rest to die in space. He turned to address his entire crew. I know we're outnumbered. I know their ship is bigger than ours. But we've faced bad odds before. More importantly, we're the only chance those people have. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Sergeant Wall spoke up. Sir, what are your orders? Blake looked at the display showing their destination. Somewhere ahead, innocent families were being terrorized by raiders who thought no one would stop them. They were about to learn what happened when humans heard a cry for help. All stations, prepare for combat, Blake announced. Engineering, I want weapons charged and ready. Medical, prepare for casualties. Marines, get your gear ready for boarding action. He paused, looking at each of his officers. We're going to show these raiders why the galaxy calls us Death Worlders, and we're going to bring those civilians home. The Iron Will flew on through hyperspace, carrying death toward those who hurt the innocent. The Iron Will dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the battle zone. Commander Blake stood on the bridge, staring at the scene before them. The alien raider ship hung in space like a metal mountain covered in spikes and weapon ports. Beside it, the cruise ship Serenity's Dream looked small and helpless. My God, whispered Lieutenant Peters. That thing is massive. The raider vessel was 3 times longer than their ship and twice as wide. Its black hull was decorated with strange symbols and what looked like trophies from destroyed ships. Weapon turrets moved slowly along its sides like the eyes of a hunting beast. Scan it, Blake ordered. Sergeant Wall worked at her station. Sir, I'm reading heavy armor, military-grade shields, and enough weapons to level a city. This ship was built for one purpose only, which is to kill other ships, sir. Inside the raider vessel, Captain Vex stood in his command center surrounded by screens showing his prize. The Vaxian cruise ship was full of valuable cargo, not just goods, but people. The slave markets would pay well for so many workers. Vex was tall and thin like all of his species, the Keth. His skin was gray like old metal, and his eyes were black holes in his skull. He had been raiding civilian ships for over 200 years, and he had never lost a battle. "Captain," called his sensor officer. "Another ship just arrived. Small vessel, unknown design." Vex looked at the screen showing the newcomer. It was tiny compared to his mighty Bloodfang. Its hull was dark gray and covered in scars, but it looked like nothing special. "Just one ship?" Vex laughed, showing his sharp teeth. "Send them a warning. Tell them to leave or be destroyed." The message went out across space to the Iron Will. Blake listened to the translation and smiled coldly. "Sir, they're ordering us to retreat," reported the communications officer. "Send a reply," Blake said. "Tell them to release the civilians and surrender their ship." When Captain Vex heard the human response, he laughed even harder. "Surrender? To that tiny ship? Fire a warning shot. Show them what real weapons look like." A beam of red energy shot from the Bloodfang toward the human ship. It was meant to miss and scare them away. But instead of running, the Iron Will did something unexpected. It accelerated straight toward the raider ship. "Battle stations," Blake announced calmly. "All weapons ready. Marines, prepare for boarding action." The human ship began to glow as its weapon systems powered up. What had looked like a small, harmless vessel suddenly revealed its true nature. Hidden weapon ports opened along its hull. Missile tubes extended from the sides. The ship's engines burned brighter as it picked up speed. "Captain," Vex's weapons officer shouted, "that ship is armed like a battle cruiser." "Impossible," Vex snarled. "It's too small to carry that much firepower." But the sensors didn't lie. The human ship was packed with weapons that should have been impossible to fit in such a small space. Worse, the energy readings showed that every system was designed for maximum destruction. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space. The Bloodfang launched everything it had: energy beams, plasma bolts, and explosive missiles. The barrage was enough to destroy a small fleet. The human ship didn't try to dodge. It flew straight through the attack, its shields absorbing hits that should have vaporized it. Some shots got through and tore holes in the hull, but the ship kept coming. Then the Iron Will fired back. The Keth had never seen weapons like these. Instead of energy beams, the humans used solid metal slugs fired at incredible speed. The projectiles punched through the raiders' shields like they were made of paper and smashed into the hull with the force of explosions. "Shields down to 60%, screamed Vex's engineer. "How is that possible?" Vex demanded. "We barely scratched them and they're tearing us apart." The human missiles were even worse. They didn't explode when they hit the hull. Instead, they burrowed inside like metal worms and then detonated deep within the ship. Entire sections of the Bloodfang went dark as internal explosions destroyed power lines and life support. Aboard the Iron Will, Blake watched the battle with calm eyes. His ship shook from enemy fire, but the damage reports were manageable. Human ships were built to take punishment and keep fighting. "Sir, we've breached their outer hull in 3 places," reported Sergeant Wall. "Their shields are failing." "Launch boarding pods," Blake ordered. "Target their engine room and bridge. Marines, you know what to do." The boarding pods shot out from the human ship like bullets. But these weren't the crude cutting tools the Keth had used on the cruise ship. These were military assault pods, designed to punch through heavy armor and deliver trained soldiers into enemy vessels. Captain Vex watched in horror as the human pods smashed into his ship. "All warriors to repel boarders," he screamed into his communicator. "Stop them at any cost." The Keth warriors were tough fighters who had terrorized the galaxy for months. They carried advanced weapons and had experience fighting scared civilians. But they had never faced human Marines. The first boarding pod cut through the hull of the Bloodfang with plasma torches. When the hole was big enough, 4 humans in black armor stepped through. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons ready, their helmets scanning the area with electronic eyes. The Keth warriors waiting in the corridor fired everything they had. Energy bolts filled the air like deadly rain. But the humans had anticipated this. They used the walls and ceiling for cover, moving in patterns that confused their enemies. When the humans fired back, their weapons didn't make pretty light shows. They made Keth warriors fall down and stop moving, Corridor secured, reported Marine Sergeant Rock over the radio. Moving to secondary target. All through the raider ship, the same scene played out. Keth warriors who had dominated helpless civilians suddenly found themselves fighting an enemy that was faster, smarter, and completely ruthless. The humans didn't shout or make threats. They just moved through the ship like a plague of death, clearing one section after another. Their weapons were designed to kill quickly and efficiently. Their tactics assumed the enemy would be dangerous and prepared for everything. For the first time in 2 centuries, Captain Vex felt real fear. The tiny human ship had torn apart his mighty vessel, and now human soldiers were hunting his warriors through the corridors of his own ship. "Send a surrender signal," he ordered his communications officer. "Sir, they're not accepting surrenders," came the terrified reply. "The humans aren't taking prisoners." Blake's voice came over all frequencies, cold and final. "You should have thought about mercy before you attacked innocent people." The battle inside the raider ship Bloodfang became a nightmare for the Keth warriors. They had spent months attacking helpless civilian ships, but now they faced an enemy that hunted them like wild animals. Marine Sergeant Rock led his team through the dark corridors of the alien vessel. His armor's night vision turned the blackness into green daylight. Behind him, 3 other Marines moved in perfect formation. They communicated through hand signals and electronic whispers that the enemy couldn't hear. "Contact ahead," Rock whispered into his helmet radio. 6 hostiles behind improvised barricade. The Keth warriors had torn apart wall panels and furniture to build a defensive position. They waited with their energy weapons charged, thinking they could stop the humans with superior firepower. They were wrong. Rock's team didn't charge the barricade like the Keth expected. Instead, they used something the raiders had never seen before: military tactics designed by a species that had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Marine Davis crawled through an air vent above the enemy position. Marine Torres found a maintenance tunnel that led behind the barricade. Rock and Marine Kim created noise and light to distract the defenders, while their teammates moved into position. When the attack came, it lasted only seconds. The Keth warriors found themselves surrounded and outgunned before they knew what was happening. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't see their enemies coming. "Section 7 clear," Rock reported. Moving to engineering. All through the ship, similar scenes played out. Human Marines moved like ghosts through corridors that Keith thought they controlled. They used the ship's own design against its crew, finding routes through ventilation systems and maintenance areas that the raiders had forgotten existed. Captain Vex retreated deeper into his ship, dragging his remaining officers with him. The bridge was heavily armored and had multiple defensive positions. Surely the humans couldn't break through his strongest defenses. "How many warriors do we have left?" he demanded. His second-in-command, Officer Grix, checked his communicator with shaking hands. "Maybe 30, Captain. The humans are killing them faster than we can regroup." 30? Vex couldn't believe it. He had started with over 200 warriors. "How is that possible?" "They fight like devils, sir. They don't make mistakes. They don't panic. They just keep coming." Meanwhile, Commander Blake led his own boarding team toward the bridge. Unlike his Marines, Blake's mission was to capture the ship's computer systems and find out who these raiders really were. The Iron Will continued its attack from outside, targeting specific systems to prevent the enemy ship from escaping. But Blake had ordered his gunners to avoid destroying the vessel completely. He wanted answers, and dead ships couldn't provide information. "Sir, we've reached the computer core," reported Technical Sergeant Brown. She was a small woman who could make any electronic system do whatever she wanted. "Give me 5 minutes and I'll have everything they've got." Blake stood guard while Brown worked her magic on the alien computers. Around them, the sounds of battle echoed through the ship as his Marines cleared the remaining resistance. "Got it," Brown announced. "Sir, you need to see this." The information on the screen made Blake's blood run cold. The Bloodfang wasn't just a single raider ship. It was part of a fleet that had been attacking civilian vessels for 8 months. The computer showed records of 17 different ships that had been captured or destroyed. "How many people?" Blake asked quietly. Brown's face was pale as she read the data. Over 4,000 civilians taken for the slave markets, sir. Men, women, children from a dozen different species. They're being held at a base in the void sector. Blake felt the familiar cold anger that made humans so dangerous. It wasn't hot rage that made people stupid. It was the ice-cold fury that made them efficient killers. Download everything, he ordered. Ship designs, base locations, slave market contacts, everything. Then send it to Fleet Command with highest priority. Sir, what about the prisoners they're already holding? Blake checked his weapon and looked toward the bridge where Captain Vex was making his last stand. We're going to get them back, all of them. The final assault on the bridge came like a thunderstorm. Blake's team didn't waste time with warnings or demands for surrender. They cut through the armored doors with plasma torches and flowed into the command center like water finding cracks in stone. Captain Vex had been a terror of the spaceways for 2 centuries. He had destroyed countless ships and sold thousands of beings into slavery. But faced with human marines in full battle gear, he looked like what he really was. A bully who had finally met someone stronger. "Wait!" he screamed as the humans surrounded him. "I can make a deal. I have information you need." Blake walked slowly toward the Keth captain. His helmet was off now, showing a human face that revealed nothing. "You're right. You do have information I need. The location of your base. The names of your contacts. The identity of everyone who bought slaves from you. Yes, I'll tell you everything. Just don't kill me." Blake studied the alien who had caused so much suffering. "You attacked a ship full of families. You were going to sell children into slavery. You've been doing this for months." "It's just business," Vex pleaded. "We never killed anyone we didn't have to." "Neither do we," Blake replied calmly. Then he pulled the trigger. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of computers. Blake turned to his team. "Strip the computer systems. I want every byte of data they have. Then prepare charges to destroy this ship." "Sir, shouldn't we capture it?" asked Sergeant Brown. Blake looked around the bridge that had been the command center for months of terror and suffering. "This ship has been used to hunt innocent people. It doesn't deserve to exist." As his team worked, Blake contacted the Iron Will. "This is the commander. Prepare rescue teams for immediate deployment to the civilian ship. Full medical support and trauma counselors." "Sir, what about the Raider base?" asked Lieutenant Peters over the radio. Blake looked at the data Brown had downloaded. The Keth base was hidden in an asteroid field 3 star systems away. It held over 4,000 prisoners from 17 different attacks, men, women, and children, who had been living in hell while their families thought they were dead. "Set course for the void sector," Blake ordered. "And send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've found a slave operation that needs to be shut down." "Sir, that's outside our patrol area. We don't have authorization for—" "We have authorization," Blake interrupted. "It's called being human." The rescue of Serenity's Dream happened faster than anyone thought possible. Human engineering teams swarmed over the cruise ship like helpful insects, fixing systems that had been damaged during the attack. Within 2 hours, the lights were back on and the air was clean again. Captain Wren stood in his restored bridge watching the humans work. They moved with incredible efficiency, but what surprised him most was how gentle they were with his passengers. The same Marines who had just destroyed an entire Raider crew now helped scared children find their parents and brought warm blankets to elderly Vaxians who were shaking from fear. "Captain Wren," said a human medic named Dr. Green. "We've checked. All your passengers. 12 people have injuries, but nothing serious. The psychological trauma will take longer to heal." Wren nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Doctor. I don't know how to repay you for this." Dr. Green smiled. "You don't need to repay anything. This is what we do." But Wren was confused. The humans had risked their lives and their ship to save people they had never met. They had fought a battle against impossible odds for strangers from another species. "Why?" "I don't understand," Wren said slowly. "You could have been killed. Your ship could have been destroyed. Why did you help us?" Dr. Green paused in her work. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but Wren could see old scars on her hands from previous battles. "Because someone sent out a call for help," she said simply. "When people are in danger, someone has to answer." Meanwhile, Commander Blake stood in the wreckage of the Bloodfang with Technical Sergeant Brown. They had downloaded everything from the raider ship's computers before destroying it. The information they found was worse than they had imagined. "Sir, the slave operation is huge," Brown reported. "They have buyers from 12 different systems. Some of the purchasers are legitimate businesses that use slave labor. Others are private collectors who buy people like they're collecting rare animals." Blake studied the data on his portable screen. Names, locations, financial records, communication logs, everything needed to destroy the entire network. But it would take time, and the prisoners being held at the raider base didn't have time. "How many ships are guarding their main base?" he asked. "According to this, at least 6 raider vessels, maybe more, plus defensive platforms built into the asteroid field." Blake was quiet for a moment. 6 ships against 1 was bad odds, even for humans. But somewhere in that hidden base, over 4,000 innocent people were waiting for rescue that might never come. "Sir," Brown continued, "Fleet Command has received our data. They're organizing a task force to deal with the slave network, but it will take them a week to assemble enough ships." "A week is too long," Blake said. "Send a message to every human ship within 50 light years. Military, civilian, cargo haulers, everyone. Tell them what we found and where we're going." Brown looked surprised. "Sir, we can't order civilian ships into combat." "We're not ordering anyone," Blake replied. "We're just letting them know that people need help. Humans don't like to ignore that kind of message." 3 hours later, the Iron Will arrived at the edge of the Void sector. Blake expected to find the hidden raider base alone, outnumbered and outgunned. Instead, he found something that made him proud to be human. 7 ships waited in space. Not military vessels, but civilian craft that had heard the call and come anyway. There was a cargo hauler that should have been delivering supplies to a mining colony. A passenger liner that had changed course from its scheduled route. Even a small exploration ship that was supposed to be mapping distant stars. "This is Captain Morris of the freight ship Hardworker," came a voice over the radio. "We heard you might need some help with a slave rescue operation." "Captain Morris," Blake replied. "This is a military action. You're not equipped for combat." Morris laughed. "Commander, my ship has been hauling cargo through pirate space for 15 years. I've got weapons and shields, and my crew knows how to use them. More importantly, I've got cargo holds big enough to carry 4,000 passengers back to safety." One by one, the other civilian captains checked in. None of them were military ships, but all of them were crewed by humans who had heard that innocent people needed help. They had dropped everything and come to assist, even though it might cost them their lives. "All ships," Blake announced. "Here's the plan." The attack on the raider base began at dawn, ship time. The hidden facility was built into a large asteroid, with weapon platforms scattered around it like deadly flowers. 6 raider ships patrolled the area, confident that their base was too well hidden and too well defended for anyone to find. They were wrong. The humans didn't fight fair. They used the asteroid field itself as cover, bouncing communication signals off space rocks to coordinate attacks. The cargo ships stayed back and provided missile support, while the combat-capable vessels engaged the defenders directly. The battle was short but intense. The raiders had superior numbers and heavier weapons, but they couldn't match human coordination and determination. When the Iron Will punched through their defenses and began landing assault teams on the base itself, the remaining raiders surrendered, rather than face human marines in close combat. Inside the hidden facility, Blake's teams found the prisoners. Over 4,000 beings from dozens of species, held in conditions that made him sick to see. Families separated for months, children who had forgotten what their parents looked like, adults who had given up hope of ever seeing home again. "It's okay," Blake told a group of frightened Vaxian children who cowered when his Marines approached. "We're here to take you home." The rescue operation took 12 hours. Human medical teams treated injuries and malnutrition. Engineering crews disabled the slave-holding systems and prepared the prisoners for transport. The civilian cargo ships opened their holds and transformed them into temporary passenger compartments. As the last of the rescued beings boarded the human ships, Blake stood in the empty slave facility. His teams had downloaded all the computers and identified every person involved in the slave trade. Fleet Command would use that information to hunt down the buyers and sellers across the galaxy. But that was tomorrow's work. Today, 4,000 people were going home. Captain Wren of Serenity's Dream found Blake on the observation deck of the Iron Will. Through the window, they could see the cargo ships preparing to depart, their holds full of passengers heading back to their families. "Commander," Wren said quietly, "I still don't understand. Why do humans do this? Why risk everything for strangers?" Blake was quiet for a long moment, watching the ships that carried the rescued prisoners toward home. "Because we know what it's like to be afraid," he finally said. "Every human child grows up on a world that tries to kill them. We learn early that the universe is dangerous and that bad things happen to good people." He turned to face the Vaxian captain. "But we also learn that when someone calls for help, you answer. Not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do." As the human ships began their journey home, word of the rescue spread across the galaxy. The story grew in the telling, as stories do, but at its heart it remained simple. When innocent people cried out in the darkness of space, the humans heard them and came. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, other raiders heard the story too. They learned that attacking civilian ships might bring more than just military response. It might bring humans, and humans were very dangerous when someone hurt the innocent. The universe was a little bit safer because of that fear.